Chair of the Historic Zoning Commission, and I would like to welcome you to the October 17th Design Review Committee meeting. Anything we discuss here today or any decisions that we say are non-binding, this is a completely voluntary meeting on your part and our part to just have an informal discussion of projects and what is likely to be approved. Thank you. And item 1 is the accessory building at 436 Boyd Mill Avenue. Matt Smith is the applicant, and I do believe on this one it would be good if you don't mind, as staff, Kelly, discussing the guidelines with us first, because this is part of our new design guideline process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. Our preservation planner is absent tonight, and so I'll be providing some information and context for this. This item was deferred from the October meeting due to some questions about how much of the upper level is habitable given building code minimums for habitable space, and that's 5-foot knee walls or higher. The staff recommendation here is to be consistent with this approach and to use the building code minimums as a means to calculate square footage of the upper floor. And the design guidelines state that design accessory structures so that their scale is subordinate to that of the principal building they serve, but in no case should they exceed 1.5 stories. Where an upper story is appropriate, limit the upper story square footage to 60% of the square footage of the lower story building footprint. The plan that was before you earlier this month, last week, was about 59%. If we take the code minimums, that brings that number up to approximately 73%.
Okay, thank you. So, did you want to talk about it, Mr. Smith?
There were two comments at last week's meeting. One was regarding that. The other one was regarding the height of the garage, the knee wall that is supported by the floor system. And the suggestion by Tyler was to see what I could do to lower that. The footprint of the garage was at approximate 47% of the footprint of the main house. So what I did was I increased the footprint of the garage. Increasing the depth of the garage allowed me to basically eliminate or minimize that knee wall. So I brought that knee wall from around 2 feet down to something like 6 inches. So I lowered that roof line while maintaining the height of that ridge. So that ridge line is at the same height. But since the walls moved out, the front wall moved out a foot, back wall moved out a foot of that front part, that brought that eliminated the need for those knee walls. So it looks more like a true 1.5 story. I apologize, I don't have an image to go along with that. I just did a rough study today, and was able to arrive at that. That also adding that area to the footprint allows me to add about 35 or so more square feet to the second floor, which brought that percentage from 73% that you mentioned, Kelly, down to something like 71%. So it's still, it didn't do anything dramatic, but it brought that percentage down just slightly.
So it's still over the guideline.
Correct. It's at between 70 and 71% right now.
Okay.
And I guess one question I had was, it's a difficult question because most of the folks aren't here, but would a percentage that's over the 60% per the guideline, but under 70%, is there an acceptable range, or is it, or is it, anything that's over 60% will not be accepted? And maybe that's a difficult question to ask, but I'm kind of trying to get a feel for
Right.
what I could do to redress it.
Well, and the actual, my question, I think you answered it the other night, but I just want to confirm again. The overall height of the accessory building, forget the grade, the overall height is a foot lower than the house?
Yes, it's a foot and some inches lower,
Okay.
so it's over a foot lower. Then, as I mentioned, the grade is several feet.
And then the grade is several feet.
Yeah.
I would, do you all want to comment, Tyler, or do you
Yeah.
want to?
Yeah. I
Either
do.
one of you,
Um,
Susan?
I mean, I think that the guidelines being at the 60% is really what we would hope you would hit. I think there have been times when we've been a little more lenient on going over some percentage amount, be it lot coverage or whatever, on a particularly big lot. And this is, but to be 10% over seems like too much. You know, if you were in the, you know, 1% or 2 over, then maybe I could understand, like, oh, you've, you know, tried to do this, and you know, a lot this size could certainly support more structure, I would say. But considering the old house, the 60% rule exists because we don't want to overwhelm the old house, and the goal is to make sure, for neighbors' purposes, for street frontage, what we're protecting, that historic kind of rhythm and fabric of the neighborhood, is that that doesn't begin to look like a whole other house back there. And so, you know, I would encourage you to, you know, I think it's going to take some scope, not just geometric tweaks, which I think the geometric tweaks you made a lot of sense, and I'm glad you did that. I think making the footprint a little bigger to make sure that the roof isn't setting a story and some change up, but actually sitting on the first story.
So it looks like
is
a
good.
true,
Yeah, it looks like a real 1.5 story.
yeah.
I do think the front, the way you have this shape, kind of T-shaped, hides a lot of that mass. I think that's
Mhm.
successful, but I think most of the commissioners up here would agree that what we don't want to do is allow something this big and then have to maybe allow it for somebody else who doesn't have as nice a configuration as you do, that hides it in a T format. Not everybody's going to be able to do that. So I think for me, I would encourage you to try and get to that 60%. And if you need 1% or 2 more, we would certainly hear an argument for this lot's really big, you know, because I feel like you've already gotten some concession because you get to count the addition to the historic house in your calculations of the footprint. So you've already kind of got a bump because of that. So that's my 2 cents. I mean, I don't know
Yeah.
how y'all feel.
Do you have any, Susan?
I'm concerned that you felt like you had to make the footprint larger, the garage larger. And the whole idea of our whole, I guess, overarching thing is to not have the garage compete with the house. And so I'm quite frankly not on board with that part of it. And I won't be able to support that percentage of the second floor.
But it's still under the 50%. So are you saying that are you questioning it if it's 50%, if it's under 50%, it's still too large?
You mean of the house
Mhm.
itself?
Because it's still under 50%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You use
that's the
more of your
preferred guideline.
50% to create more volume upstairs.
Yeah.
Or not necessarily more volume, just configured differently.
Mhm.
Yeah, my comment would be, I think allowing a 1.5 story accessory structure on a 1.5-story house, you're kind of there. I think we've used up everything we can give in this particular situation. If it were a 2-story house, it'd be to me, a completely different conversation. But this is a 1.5-story house that isn't that, the historic fabric of the house is not that big. And then you're adding an accessory building that's also a 1.5-story, which is allowed, so I'm going with that. If I'd been the one making the rules by myself, I might have rather not seen a 1.5-story accessory structure on a 1.5-story historic structure. But that is given. And so, to me, in this situation, because I don't know how big the original house is, but I don't think it's all that much bigger than the accessory. But we count the new addition, and then we allow a 1.5-story on a 1.5-story. So I will not be supporting it being over the square footage for those reasons. But there's 3 of us, so. So we are not necessarily the majority.
When you developed the 60% rule, did you think of the code minimum wall heights at that time, or is that something that was developed later?
We did a peer review of other communities, and I don't recall the community off the top of my head, but another one used 60% as a standard to ensure that the accessory structure stays subordinate to the principal house. And that's the basis for the guideline. Yes, it's the square footage, so the habitable space upstairs. And to be consistent across all applications, we really need to use the code minimums to do that. So we apply them across the board.
To avoid confusion in the future, could you amend the guidelines to include stating that how to calculate that area? If I had known that prior, I would have not submitted the design, and I wouldn't have gone this far down the road.
If you had known,
If I had known that when you calculate the area for the second floor, no matter where the walls are, I guess the new rules is that you have to pretend all the walls are 5 feet tall. And
Yeah.
I didn't know that, and that wasn't in the guidelines.
the only thing in my mind that the Historic Zoning Commission is looking at is the mass of the building.
Yeah, and I sympathize with you. You just happen to be the first one. And
Yeah.
you're right. We didn't necessarily have that 5 foot in mind, but after Mr. Tosh, our building official, had kind of talked about what counts as habitable space. I mean, we all know there's playrooms with 3-foot knee walls all over town, and it's conditioned space, but doesn't count in code terms. And it seemed like our job, we have to pin something to the board and go, well, this is how we can be fair to everybody. And that's where the 5 foot number came from. Well, if that's what code kind of calls it, then that's an easy place for us to say, well, maybe every submission tells us what would be under 5 feet, whether you finish that or not. And that's a good way for us to just judge apples to apples. And like I said, you happen to be the first one, which is unfortunate, but you're helping us figure this out the same as hopefully we're helping you figure this out too. So, but yeah, I don't know what the mechanism is for amending the guidelines. I know that in Metro they have a worksheet just for outbuildings, and you go through, and it's not part of the design guidelines, but it's something we fill out, and it shows you exactly what historic's going to be looking for in terms of eave heights and ridges, and it's just a worksheet you fill out, the square footages, and then, we could do a worksheet like that says, what would be the square footage at 5 foot knee wall? Maybe that could be something that helps. That's
Yeah.
not a formal revision that has to go to BOMA, but is something that could be a tool that we could offer.
Because I had a pre-design meeting with Historic, and just, I wanted to make sure that I was covering all the bases, and
Sure.
60% was mentioned, and I said, okay, but
Yeah.
there was no mention of that. I've remodeled my own house, and I had like 3 or 4 foot knee walls, and it was exactly that, a playroom, and did that because it was, I wasn't tearing the roof off. But I've been designing houses for 20 years. I haven't ever designed a room with 5 foot walls. And nowadays, the lowest I go is 6. But I understand having an objective criteria.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to put that out there, I don't know what your experience is, but I generally try to keep it at 6.
We're
6
going to
minimum.
have a workshop, and maybe we need to discuss this, because I still don't really understand what the knee wall has to do with it. I'm just looking at the shape and mass of the building compared to the house.
And it might be the wrong term. Some people, there's knee wall, pony wall. Could you
I
go
know
to-
what a knee wall is.
Could you go to the perspective views? Or, this would be good, so the elevation, basically, what I'm saying is that the space that's above the garage doors, that will be coming down, because there's a small, currently in this version, there's a small knee wall on top of the floor system. Let's say there's 2 feet of wall, and then your roof starts. And then, could you go to the perspective views? I think it's the next page or 2.
Page 7.
And especially considering the size of the lot, I think it's going to make a more visual impact to have the garage be slightly deeper and have that roof sit down lower, or that front wall be less tall than it is.
I would agree with
So
that.
that was,
Yeah.
in my mind, I thought that was an improvement.
I agree.
Yeah.
I
And-
think that's an improvement. I just, what is it I'm trying to say? I just think if you look, it's a situational situation, in that it's a 1.5-story house, and we're trying to put a 1.5-story structure as being subordinate to a 1.5-story house. And that doesn't lead to a 2nd story having much height. I think it is what it
Yes,
is.
And I think the rules are doing exactly what we hoped they would do. I think it's going to force you to make the building smaller, which is, I mean, we're
And
not
I-
after getting smaller buildings, we're after everything being in scale with the neighborhood. And I
Yeah,
think that
and I
is
think
it's
what you
doing.
did does matter. I
Yeah.
would say that it was a good thing.
Yeah. But I think you might have to look at the scope with your client and just see what could be cinched up, because right now, the 2nd floor is too much square footage for what the rules call out. Your ground floor, sounds like you've got it under the 50. Totally thrilled with that. I think moving the roof down makes me happy, because that's one of those relative things. The existing house, the roof eaves start at the top of the 1st floor, not another 2 or 3 feet up. And it's those type of proportional things that can make outbuildings look like they don't fit. It's maybe a little out of context because it's just an odd proportion and scale. But I think what you did helps. Just got to find some of that square footage out of the upstairs, which might require you to take some out of the 1st floor.
Okay.
That's what,
I would concur with what Tyler was saying.
And again, I'm sorry that it's you that has to be the first one, because I know you spent time and client
Yeah.
fee on
Mm-hmm.
this. And
Yeah.
I've been there, I know how that is.
And it's a situation where the house is not allowing a lot of flexibility because of its height.
Yeah.
It's not real
Yeah.
big.
So, if it would help, I think others, if you put in the guidelines, how to calculate the area
Okay.
with the
Absolutely.
5-foot knee walls. I would-
Absolutely.
If
You're
you
right,
want
that'd be
to,
a
we are
suggestion.
going to have a workshop. If you want to send some comments to us, we would appreciate it,
Okay.
because it is a team effort.
Because any objective criteria we can have on the front end when you start designing.
Oh,
Okay.
absolutely.
That totally
Absolutely.
helps.
Thank
So,
you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. The second item is discussion of demolition at 724 Fair Street. And Jeff Ravel is the applicant.
724.
Am I saying your name correctly, Jeff, your last name? You- Huh? Rietveld. Okay. Can you put up the structure, Kelly or Emily?
Is this the house we saw with the?
This is the oldest
shed
house.
off the back?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I was like, it looks just like that house. It is that house.
We've seen it likely a few more times.
Okay.
It's a big project.
I told somebody after our Franklin Grove project, I said, man, that was a lot at one time. I said, but I'd fuss even worse if it was piecemeal. I said, I don't know which is better, seeing the same people 50 times or doing 50 things at one meeting.
One time.
Okay.
If you all want to go ahead and start, have you got the historic structure
You'd like a
to start
picture, a
with? There it
photo?
is.
Okay.
Yep.
So I feel like.
Thank you.
I'm Kevin Coffey, by the way.
Yes.
I feel like we're maybe going to rehash a little bit of the discussion you were just having.
That's fine.
About the accessory building and the 60% rule. It's something that's new to me, so I didn't really necessarily take that into account here, but I do have a couple comments about that. So I'll kind of let Aaron kind of give us a background on the approach we were taking for this.
Hi, I'm Aaron Rietveld, client's son, and working with Kevin on the design. So the proposal is to remove, obviously, the dilapidated barn on the property, which has been proven to be not structurally sound by Michael Garman, and to replace it with a proper garage. And the idea was to create a structure that was based on a 19th century structure that I had found doing some research on a federal property. And the idea is to kind of merge a carriage house with this outer building to give a very distinctive accessory structure appearance, but also allow for some storage and to make it aesthetically proper to the main residence as well. So that's the elevations and site plan that you see is reflective of a proposed garage structure that we believe is suitable for the house.
So if you want to put that one, that'll be fine.
So maybe the site plan is the best place to start. I think that's the last drawing we included. So what's showing here is that we plan to put the structure, it's about 30 feet back from the existing house. And so if you to kind of recap on the existing house is we added no square footage to that at all. It's, everything we did there was inside the envelope. You know, it'd been added onto over time, but basically everything we did was in the existing envelope. So we're well below that 50% for coverage. And the structure that we design, which I think is kind of the telling point, I kind of wish on these accessories you would just say that it has to be a percentage of the height of the original structure, as opposed to messing with knee walls and ceiling heights and things like that. Just say what it is, you know, say that the eave height can be so high and the,
Well, it depends on the house.
well, they all depend on the house. And so
Huh.
any restriction or rule or guideline you come up with is not going to be a catch-all.
No.
So, and we're aware of that. So
It
I
all
mean,
depends.
I totally understand the direction you're going. That's kind of minimize the structure. So, kind of the precedent that we followed here is a true 1.5-story precedent. But that also means that the knee walls on the outside are about 4 feet tall. Our plan for this structure is to use the upper level only for storage, no living areas at all. So it's basically the same width as the footprint. It just goes from a 4-foot knee wall up to whatever it ends up being in the middle. And that's kind of based on the precedent. We liked this, we had a picture of kind of a precedent structure in there that was obviously an outbuilding. And we just felt like it had this character of being an outbuilding, but also had a really nice kind of classical kind of feel to it, a minimal kind of feel. And that's kind of the approach we were taking with this, even though we know our structure's larger than this. So the windows we have in ours that are in the half-story basically sit at the floor level of the upper storage floor. And I've actually been in a few structures, historic structures that are like that. Almost verges more on something like a tobacco barn or something more agrarian, which would not be out of character for the history of this house. At one time, there were accessory structures, they didn't call them that were attached, that were probably 3 or 4 times the floor area of the original house that strung along the right side. So I feel like this kind of precedent of maybe a barn or carriage house is a good one for this particular house. And outside of the style of it, I did that kind of composite drawing that's up there right now that showed the structure in the same plane as the front of the house. So it's down several feet from the main level, floor level of the house, but also excluding the cupola, probably 3 to 4 feet shorter than the house is as well. So it's not only quite a bit shorter, it's set well back on the site, 30 feet behind. And you know from the site that you've got a floodplain back there, so that's going to be one of our other issues. So it drops off fairly quickly once you get to the back of this structure.
Have you all contemplated what's going to be allowed in the flood area as opposed to what you're, or with what you're proposing?
Yeah, and we're in kind of the catch-22 situation because they want to see something before
Got
you make
you.
a determination, but we'd like a determination before we started. So we know we have to play that game. So kind of what we're proposing is at least part of the structure, if not all of it, to be on a supported slab, maybe precast slabs for the main level. And so it's more of an open area underneath it where if it's tall enough, maybe they could park a tractor under it. But they wouldn't necessarily have to put anything back there. As opposed to doing a crawl with all the flood vents is just a situation where you can leave a good portion of it open anyway.
And
So-
then on the demolition, you all have an engineering report now that says it cannot be saved.
Yeah, Michael Garman went through and did a fairly extensive search and report on what was going on in there. And it really kind of confirmed, what I believed in the first place. The floor in there is dirt, basically, and it's sloped front to back, probably a good 3 feet. So it's really not a structure that's usable, per se. And a lot of the structure in there is really not salvageable either. Somebody might be able to salvage something out of it. But it's not like really great old timbers or anything in there. There are a couple.
It's just unlike anything in town. And I know at the full commission, they'll be looking for the structural engineer's report. Yes.
Well, it may be appropriate for staff to talk about a couple items if y'all have presented the information about the proposal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. This is really two parts, the demolition request and then the new
Mhm.
accessory structure request. And the design guidelines state that demolition is not permitted unless there are extraordinary circumstances, and then lays out some criteria for those. A structural report was submitted, but it's not as detailed as other structural reports that we've received in the past. And it doesn't include photographic documentation or economic hardship information, so we wanted you to be aware of that. And then looking at the proposed accessory structure, we know the simplicity of the building that is present today, and the request is to build what appears to be a much larger stylized version with a level of detailing that may compete with the principal structure. And it's also of note is the whole area is in the floodplain, and it cannot be habitable or finished. It could be used for storage and vehicle parking, which is what you all have indicated. So-
Just because I've been around downtown so long, there was a house across the street from y'all that they actually tore down because water pushes through there so fast that it just cattywampus the house. So, would hope that consideration is given to how water flow goes through there. I guess, does that happen, Randall, when codes looks at it?
We do our review we look at the structural components of it. Sometimes Mr. Coffey, and like Mr. Garland, a lot of times submit. So we'll look at the structural plans that's been drawn, and we'll compare them. The IRC is a prescriptive code, so then you work from there. But in this instance, this will be some engineering, so we would review those engineered plans as well with that. Most of the time, when we start talking about water flow and stuff, that's going to come back over to your stormwater department, and engineering is going to
And they
address
look
those.
at that too?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I just know that a house got pushed over across the street.
Yeah, I mean, it's really in nobody's interest to do a
Yeah,
structure that,
that's right.
Can conceivably,
Right.
wash away, within, certain parameters. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I'm sure if a tornado comes through there with a storm, I guess there's a perfect storm that could happen, but,
Yeah.
nobody wants that.
No.
Nobody wants that to happen. So, obviously, we would engineer it
Mm-hmm.
to that level.
I just was wondering if the reason the historic structure that's there was kind of how it was just because they knew the land. They knew the character of the water through there. I don't know.
It's possible, but I don't really think the water has gotten into it that much.
Okay.
I'm sure it has it on a couple of occasions, but, you know, frankly.
Not all the time.
No.
No.
In the 2010 event, I don't think the water
Not
really
near it, no.
got close to it. So we kind of look at that as
Absolutely.
a common sense benchmark, not that something couldn't happen in the future, but
Yeah.
I feel like it might have been something more practical as to what they were keeping in there and what they
There.
were doing, you
Yeah.
know, to be able to wash it out the back, probably. So, but in any event, it's not really, this is one of the reasons why I kind of requested that we set up a site visit for you.
Right.
For you to look at.
And look at it. And I think that's fine. Do you all, either one of you have any comments?
I would concur that the level of detail is more than what we prefer to see with an accessory structure in terms of what the staff report says. And, you know, the elevation that showed the house and then this behind it, it makes a bigger statement than I wish it would.
Okay.
Tyler?
What's the, you know, the footprint of the main house, the square footage? Is it really 2,500 and something?
It is, it's 2,600 something.
Okay,
I don't have the exact number written here. I'd be
okay.
happy to get that to you so you know. I'll have it on the drawings, obviously, in the future, but
Yeah, I was just looking at the site plan and it looks close to twice the size, but
yeah,
it's
it's,
close.
kind of my range was just slightly over 1,300 would have been half, so, and that includes, we have that little covered porch area on the side. It includes that as well.
Okay.
So it's not just that main block.
Yeah, and in terms of the detailing and such, I mean, I understand the desire to maybe, you know, make it really feel part of the house and the property. But at the same time, you know, we use the Department of Interior standards as our guidelines for Franklin's guidelines. And they usually recommend against that, as you know, making it kind of distinctly new. I think even some simple things like taking the cupola off can help do that. You know, you've got masonry and the way it's detailed with the trim band and the siding out at that same plane. You know, if that were more like a water table or something, probably more appropriate. The height thing, you know, we really have to sort of stick to our guns on this 60% thing. Even if it means that one of these bays on the side of the garage is double height or something. I think there's some ways that you could address that. I think it's a big mass, but what's different between this and the project before specifically is that this is a tall house.
Yes.
And so I think it holds a little more weight, the house does, against this. But I think toning down the detailing to something just simpler, which it's not that elaborate. Your drawings are just good.
Well,
they're more detailed than most drawings we see.
Yeah.
So,
But I
yeah.
do sometimes leave the stuff off because it's a little
The
more
hatch.
readable, the hatch, and,
Yeah.
and I think it's interesting. You said something about, to me, it reads as less detail if the upper level is actually
Yeah, flush.
outside,
Yeah.
flush it than if you have the water table because of the shadow line and everything,
Sure.
but, you know.
Yeah, but I think people are used to seeing houses built in that way, with brick being a veneer. Whereas there are historic buildings that were masonry, that the structure was masonry, and they have siding at top levels that goes over brick.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so it's kind of that, you know, giving something that's prototypical things that we see today make it feel like it is a modern construct, which it is. So it's just, and those are nitpicky comments, but like I said, it's because your drawings are so good. If you left all the hatches off, we'd go, what is this? What's it made of? So they're good drawings. The height holds up okay for me. I'm not sure just at first glance. I want to look at it some more, but the front elevation is helpful that you did with that in the background. But it's a big building. By right, you're allowed to have that 50% footprint, but it's a lot of footprint. It looks really, it's big. It's another little house back there.
I think the comment I made earlier about maybe having a height restriction as opposed to the floor level and knee wall is exactly what you said. You could make a bay, I could make the ceilings down there 14 feet on the main level, and the knee
Yeah.
walls, would technically not exist, and it would be the exact same mass.
Right.
So it's kind of a smoke and mirrors situation
right.
where if you just gave it a height restriction, you could say
Yep.
that's what it is,
Well-
so.
I think
Uh,
Kelly had a comment.
Kelly?
Oh, I just wanted to add one more alternative is to look at the material to help with the massing and using a rot-resistant wood, a flood-proofing
That's
wood
where I was
might-
going to say, my test for me on exterior buildings, one of them, on accessory structures, one of them is your eye going to run to that instead of the historic property? And in this situation, I would say yes. This is a very unique style building for our community. I can't think of anything like it. So it makes my eye run straight past the historic structure to what is really a beautiful accessory structure. It's beautiful. But in the context, that isn't, in my mind, what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to achieve something that lets your eye go to the historic home instead of running to something with that much detail and that unique looking in the back. So wood would be a suggestion. I think the cupola, absolutely, I couldn't support that for that reason. So I think I think generally speaking, for this style, which is house, which is, a vernacular style house here, this is an extraordinary house. And I think that the outbuildings, obviously by the one that's there, are much more simple. And I would want to see, especially with it being this large a building, simplified. I think wood would be one option that would do that.
It'll hold much less weight if it doesn't have the masonry on it. But, yeah, masonry sure keeps the water out.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
going to say the practical side of
The
that.
practical
Right.
side is, and I think
Maybe there's a base of some sort that's
It c-
low.
yeah.
Yeah.
but,
Well, that's another one of the neighborhood services rules about the base coming up a couple feet. So in lieu of having the masonry come all the way up to the floor level, you could have it come up a couple of feet. Yeah, I think we'll probably be open to that. I can't speak for you on that one.
And this house is in the context of so many smaller homes. So I think, that, I know y'all are that's a consideration too, but
Yeah,
I'm
we've
glad
got-
part of it's tucked behind. Would be even more wonderful if a little bit more could be tucked behind.
We've got the advantage of, the way the right side of the property dips, of being able, it actually makes it less conspicuous.
Absolutely.
To be back, not right
There,
behind the house. And it's something that's really easier,
Okay.
easier to see when you're out at the site.
Gotcha.
And I do believe that I think when you're out at the site, I don't think your eye would be drawn
Yeah.
to this first.
Can we have a site visit, arrange that?
We can.
I think if the applicant's asking for it, and why not? It matters. This house matters.
You guys
Yeah.
have to behave, though, if you come out. You can't walk through the main house. You have
Open
to
toe shoes. all
And
Stay
that.
it's
on
just,
target.
I mean, it's so exciting to see. At one point in my career, the Board of Realtors paid to put a roof on this house because we were very concerned about it getting lost to rain. So it's an exciting project.
Yeah.
It is.
Interesting house.
Is,
And
I think,
yeah.
anything else?
I had a question. If
Yes.
because I think there is a code thing with and the reason why brick was kind of the decided material is because I think there's a correlation between floodplain level, where the ground floor is,
Yeah.
and then what amount of that actually has to be a hard surface versus a wood
Got
or a fake wood kind of thing. And I think with that, you would almost be at like 50% of the structure would need to be brick, and
Yeah,
then you would
I-
be siding above. So my one question would be that, do you think if we were to do kind of like the McEwen Harris house, where one of their garages, which I believe was an old smokehouse, at one point is painted brick? And
I
what that
thought
does
about
is it
that too.
minimizes the appearance of the structure because it starts to look more like the sunroom addition
Yeah.
in the back, and it recedes, but then we
Yeah.
could still be practical about
Right.
this.
I think, at least I'll speak for me. I wouldn't take anything like that off the table in this situation.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's, the
I
board
had even
exists.
thought, I'd
Yeah.
thought of that too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to that because I think historically too, you see a lot
Right.
of brick structures get painted over time. and
Right.
I think if it were all white and it kind of looked more like a siding structure, because it's in proximity to that new large addition off the
Mm-hmm.
back. That was really a reversion of the 60s edition.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would have a very similar appearance, and then
Mm-hmm.
it would never compete with the red brick federal portion of the house.
And the only time that we can have control over paint color, to let you know, is when it's painted brick for the
Okay.
first time. So in fairness, I'll just say white might not be my first choice.
Okay.
But I don't think I wouldn't take an option off the table, given the situation
Right.
of the water,
Right.
Yeah, it's a legitimate hardship that exists
Yeah,
to the site.
I
And that's
agree.
what we're here to hear.
Yeah.
You go by the rules
Yeah.
until you can't, and then you present the
Yeah.
case why you can't go by the rules.
And I
We need
wouldn't-
brick for
yeah.
flood, then we hear that.
Right.
And I wouldn't take it being brick off the table either. It's just looking at options to make it land as non-competitive to the historic property visually as possible.
So, one more thing I thought of. I don't know if the flood situation changes that square footage percentage on the upper level
Yeah.
because this is not
Not
finished. and you
finished,
can't-
right.
It's not habitable, so I don't know if the 60% number is still a thing on this or not. I mean, I know the idea behind it is to lessen mass, but we
Oh, I'll
really-
be looking at personally, I'll be looking at the 60%. But, I'll be looking at the 60, I'll
And-
just say
And nothing
that.
precludes the next owner from coming in and trying to finish that out.
Yeah,
And so we do have to think about things like that.
Yeah.
Even though I definitely think what you're saying is genuine and that's what you're gonna do with it. It's just the fact of the matter that that's really not about not have people have conditioned square footage. It's about us controlling the mass
The
of
mass.
the building.
Right,
So,
right.
is it?
That's just a
Is it
mass
too big?
thing.
You're lucky you have a really tall,
Building.
wide house.
yeah.
But we're still going to be critical of it because the next person, or the person before you that doesn't have the big house,
Right.
we can't judge it that differently. I mean, we want to be
Right.
specific to your site, but at the same time, we have to be fair in adjudicating the rules to everybody fairly.
Right. So,
And
Kelly had a
staff-
comment.
Staff
Kelly.
would also like to follow up after this meeting about the materials to make sure we coordinate with our floodplain coordinator on on exactly what the requirements are for materials for flood-proof wood and
Okay.
rot-resistant wood.
Okay,
So,
makes sense.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I've got to go.
You've got to go.
Thank you.
Okay,
I'm so sorry.
and then there were
And
two,
then number two.
so.
Thanks, Tyler.
We're discussing signage at 1001 Benelli Park Court, and Jim Poole is the applicant.
Yes, thank you. And Cindy McShane, who's the treasurer of the HOA, is here as well, and she's the one who signed the affidavit. Okay, I'm not sure what you all have, but kind of what happened is, I don't know if you're familiar with Benelli Park.
We're familiar with every single house at Benelli Park.
Yeah, you are. And when you pull into our neighborhood, there's an empty lot, it's kind of common ground. And it needs a little attention. It's got some ratty rose bushes and trees that, are not in good shape. So the HOA had a meeting and we came up with the idea of trying to do something to enhance it, make it look like other lots along Boyd Mill. So we hired an architect, Hebert and Ball, and he came up with a drawing. Connor Ball came up with a drawing. I saw it up there a minute ago. And basically what we're attempting to do is put a wall similar to the mini walls that are along Boyd Mill. And, if you walk down there, they're all different
Yeah.
types. There's dry stack, there's some with mortar, there's some short, there's some taller. So we're trying to match the wall that's across the street from us. This is on the right-hand side. This is 431 Boyd Mill. So we're proposing to match this stone and build a 20-foot wall over on, if you can go to that next slide. That's kind of a view of the lot on the left. It's like lot there you go. So we were gonna put a 20-foot wall in there. We were gonna remove those two pine trees, which, are really in poor condition and really a hazard. There's rose bushes that are right there with the 3 dogwoods, so we're gonna put a wall there. And then someone came up with the idea, well, why don't we put a sign on the wall that kind of names the neighborhood? So Connor proposed doing kind of a limestone inset in the wall, and then putting letters that say Benelli. We're not gonna put Benelli Park. And so that is kind of and then we're gonna landscape around the wall. There's another section that shows the landscaping. Then we're gonna have like a low voltage light that kind of lights the sign up at night. And then we're also gonna light up, there's a giant oak tree that's in that lot. Someone told me it's one of the oldest trees in Franklin. So we thought it'd be really nice to have some uplights on that at night. So that was kind of the overall scope of our project.
So the Benelli will be on Boyd Mill,
Yes,
facing out on Boyd Mill.
that's correct. That's that kind of that lower image. Yeah, back up one slide. I think you had it zoomed in a second ago. The drawing from Hebert and Ball from Connor. Yes. So the Benelli will be facing Boyd Mill. The wall is, I think, 3'6" high. And we just kind of offset it. It isn't exactly centered. And I think the sign, the limestone inset is 6 feet long, 1 foot too high, and then we're proposing 8-inch letters to be attached to the limestone inset that will face Boyd Mill. And it's going to be, kind of low. We don't want it to be, loud.
My kind of knee-jerk reaction is we'll need to see the materials for the stone wall to make sure that it blends with what's there. And then, to me, the signage is kind of making it more suburban suburbia looking than I would want to be if I were Benelli Park. That's just my knee jerk. I'd almost rather see,
Let's let Kelly have her.
Kelly, do you have a
comment?
comment?
Well, yes, this is the first request for a development entrance sign since the adoption of the design guidelines. And stone walls are very prevalent on the street. Staff's comment was that 20 feet in width may be long for this context, but it will really help us see that with a photograph with the wall in place. Kind of photoshopped in so that we can see how large that is. The sign area maximum is also 5 square feet, so it sounds like this is slightly larger than the maximum allowed. So that would help reduce the overall size of the sign.
So the samples should be easy because, you know, we're gonna match the adjacent corner was what our attempt
Right.
was.
That may be harder than you think,
Well, and
because those are magnificent stones.
yeah, they are. And he, you know, the guy that's gonna do the work for us came out and looked, and he says he has a source, so.
Oh, good.
But we'd be happy to submit, you know, the samples ahead of time. And then as far as, the length, you know, the 6 foot length, I mean, we just feel like that, you know, if the letters get much smaller than 8 inches, as low as it's gonna be, you know, it's not really gonna, you know, kind of give us what we were looking for.
You all were
We'll-
just looking for when you were trying to tell
Some
somebody to get to
identification.
your house.
Right.
Yeah, I
Because
see
people
that.
always say, you know, well, where are you? So, well, there's an empty lot.
Yeah.
As soon as you see the
See
empty
empty
lot.
lot,
turn in.
yeah.
It'd just be nice to have a sign, you know, that kind of identifies, the neighborhood. And
I can see that. I just, and that may be okay. It may be okay. I think the Photoshop is a good idea. You know, I'm thinking, what is there at Ledge Lawn? Do you know?
I do not.
I don't either.
I don't think there's anything.
Yeah.
There's nothing
There's
there.
Harlansdale Manor has an example of a stone entrance wall, and it has an H
Right,
with a limestone background that
Right,
helps
so they,
identify
yeah.
it.
yeah, that.
Let's see, have you? Yes.
So after.
So if you're trying to look like that, I mean, that may be fine.
That's what the attempt is,
Photoshop
yes.
would,
So when you say
tell us.
Photoshop, something more than,
yes, it's where you actually put it on a photograph.
okay. I could probably get him to do that and kind of show where it would be. Where's the plan with the landscaping? There's a section of that drawing that has the landscaping. Yeah, that probably doesn't make it any clearer, but we can easily do that.
Well, I just wonder about the context of the stone wall relative to the style of the houses. And I know you know, you're saying that there's stone walls on Boyd Mill, but in Harlansdale, that context is, you know, taking that, there's federal houses in there, there's all different, you know, types of houses, and Benelli seems to me is more vernacular houses, is that right? You know,
Well, a twist on it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
They're designed, I think,
Yeah.
to look historic, I think is what the idea was.
a little, yeah.
But if you look at
But-
if you go back to those pictures,
But the rock wall is actually going to face Boyd Mill.
right.
correct.
So,
You can't really even see the houses from Boyd Mill. They're kind of, downhill.
So
if
to
you
me,
will.
that's maybe enhancing what's on Boyd Mill, if there's a way to
Right.
match it.
Right.
So, you got that on one corner, and then I think I took a picture of what that's across the street, at 435.
But the thing that, in that context, what concerns me is that when you go stick a name in a rock wall, it's kind of like, could there be, and I will ask you this, Kelly, if it's even allowable, like, would it be allowable to have just a simple oval wrought iron arm sign that said Benelli?
Yes, it would. It's all about the context, but there are several options, a post and arm, a post and panel, and a development entrance sign that are all options for the entrance to an infill neighborhood. And you all had a question earlier about ledge lawn, and so we just wanted to bring up the street view. It does not have an
It doesn't
entrance
have
sign to it.
anything.
Right.
And part of me is like, it's almost like, so I would be more comfortable with just some kind of simple sign that wasn't in stone, because if the stone were inside, that'd be different, but you're going down a little neighborhood, and I'm like, to me, I just always looked at this as kind of an extension of the Boyd Mill neighborhood. So that's where I kind of have a rub that,
So you like the wall, but you don't like the sign, don't like the letters.
it's not a matter of like, is that in the context of that neighborhood that all of a sudden that whole, to me, the whole rock wall is going to look like, hey, I belong to somebody else. But yet it's facing Boyd Mill. That's where, if you're looking at historic neighborhoods, I can't remember where I've ever seen something like that. I've seen things where there was a boulevard, and in the middle of the boulevard that was, one of those old, I think they were called streetcar neighborhoods. I've seen it, but there isn't a boulevard situation there. So, to me, something that more reads like a simple street sign going in that way would make more sense to the context of a historic neighborhood.
Well, I can certainly talk to Connor about that, coming up with some option like that.
But beautiful rock, to me, rock walls, there are a lot of them in that neighborhood. It's just when it gets the signage on it that I'm kind of like,
Right.
do no harm.
All right, well, I will talk to him. Do you want to see a Photoshop
I think
option?
that would be amazing. It would just help everybody, the staff evaluate it.
Okay,
Might make me go, maybe I don't have a problem with letters on a rock wall. I think I do in that context.
well, that's kind of why, we hired Connor. I thought, well, he kind of knows, what things should look like and all of that. And I mean, and he said that he could attend, the meeting if we
It may
wanted
be
him
so
to.
quiet that it doesn't bother me, and I think it may be so quiet that it doesn't do a bit of good to tell people where you are. But if you got it to where it didn't intrude on the character of the neighborhood, it may get so quiet. So that would be the reason I would say, consider your options of what the city allows.
Okay. So when I get this photoshopped option, then submit it to who? And when?
Staff, city staff, city planning.
Okay,
uh,
through the.
preservation
IDP or
planner.
Whatever, that I submitted this through?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then next steps would be the November 14th meeting, or,
Well, it depends on the submittal, so it may qualify for administrative COA review, which would be a review by staff. This size exceeds the maximum in the guidelines, so anything like that is forwarded to the commission for review as a public body.
okay,
So you may not, it may be able to be approved by staff.
okay,
The only reason you're here is because it exceeded the guidelines.
okay. And
And
the
I-
guidelines are what?
The guidelines are on our website, and we can send you those so you can see the different sign types for residential neighborhoods.
Okay.
We can do that this week.
Okay,
But now that you're here, it's given me an opportunity to say that I would second guess the idea of putting letters on a rock wall if it were anything besides like a bronze plate or something.
well, and that's an option, to do something like that.
Yeah.
I don't think we would be opposed to that. Similar to, like this was Carrowood, which is down the road, just down from us on
right.
Boyd Mill. So we were kind of copying that, and then there was Harlansdale, and something like this, like what you're talking about for Jim Warren.
Yes, sir.
So if that would make you feel better, that,
Well, I just think it's extraordinary and unusual to see a carved-out piece in a rock wall in a historic neighborhood. This is facing the neighborhood, Kelly. Those are my comments, so,
the
and,
Boyd Mill neighborhood.
yes, sir.
And I would recommend that you look at other neighborhoods that are similar to yours in terms of the overall style of the houses and, just the feel of the neighborhood, and see what other neighborhoods have done that are similar to this. And I think that would be really helpful for us,
Okay,
and bring images.
But lucky you to be in that wonderful location.
oh, it's fabulous.
Yes,
We absolutely love it.
a little quiet spot.
It is very quiet, it's very nice, so we have thoroughly enjoyed living there. All right, well, I will try to get that photoshopped option, get that to you guys, and then you'll send me those guidelines, then we'll see what the next steps are.
Thank you.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay. And now we are alterations of windows at 212 and 214 Main Street. Tad LaFever.
Yes. This is Denise Askew.
Hi.
Denise is looking to potentially lease the main floor. She's got a ladies' clothing boutique in Pacific Palisades, California, and she's wanting to open up another store here as well. So we were just trying to get some guidelines on what you would allow there at that location. So we know it's not a historic building, but it's in the
Right.
historic
District. It actually existed before historic zoning.
Okay.
And do you have any comments, staff, on this? Okay. Do you want to go first, or,
Certainly.
okay,
The building is non-historic, was built around 1976. And so replacement of windows is appropriate in its own right because it's a non-historic building. The building has a French eclectic architectural style, and any replacement should be in keeping with that style per the guidelines. The guidelines recommend the use of wood or composite that has the appearance of wood, windows and doors in lieu of metal. The light pattern, for staff comment, is that it should not try to mimic the 231 building across the street, but a grid pattern is appropriate for this architectural style. And then we had a question for the applicant as well. There were two options submitted in the package, and one of them shows the balcony staying, and one of them shows the balcony being removed. So if y'all could clarify that for the commission.
We just tried to, I didn't realize that we had to have photographs submitted with the application, and so we just found out last minute that we needed to have you something. So we were just trying to get you guys something so that you could give us recommendations on what would be appropriate, so we don't end up having the same kind of scenarios that the first couple of applicants had, so that we present something that's gonna be acceptable right out of the gate. So the balcony is intended to stay there. The one that didn't have it was something that I put together, and so we just try to have two different ideas, and you guys, that you could get an idea of what we were thinking about
also
moving
created-
forward. So, and she's got a couple of things that she's created as well, if you guys want to take a look at
I
those.
can show you, and I just did some close-ups of the rotted
Yeah.
windows, if you don't mind. Do you want me to give these?
Give her one and give staff.
Are they all different?
And yeah, we apologize, we just didn't want to have something drawn up without
And
your
you said
approval first, of course.
the building was built in,
1976.
so it's 50 years old, right? Is that right?
70?
No, not quite.
Not
Yeah,
quite.
not quite. Okay.
When you're speaking.
Oh, push it, sorry.
So what you've provided in photographs is a third option? Is that?
It's just probably a little more, just something, the first one was so fast, we literally had 15 minutes
I
to do
can't,
the.
can you talk?
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
There it goes.
There it
Sorry.
goes.
I apologize. The first two, we just did 15 minutes. We haven't had a architect draw up anything. We wanted to only get your approval and your suggestions.
That's a good idea.
So these are just literally a mock-up of some kind of idea. But of course, we agree with whatever you suggest to keep in line with the building and how it is now, which I think is so lovely. So that's what this is. But so the next time we would show you something, of course, that you, with your suggestions, with a professional.
Well, go ahead. Do you want to go ahead, Kelly? I was going to say this was the first generation of revitalization of downtown Franklin. And I don't personally have objections to some changes. What I've seen feels like it makes the building like it's fighting against itself a little bit. As far as style goes, what do you see, Susan?
Well, I think what you're asking for is to replace the windows.
Mhm.
And so why not just keep the grid pattern that's already there and replace what's already there? And then this one shows the darker muttons. And it's my understanding that that would compete with 231. Is that correct? Is that correct? That we're trying to avoid that?
Yes, so that it doesn't look exactly like what's across the street. And our guidelines, thank you, recommend wood or composite wood. And the opposite side of the street is a metal.
We were just trying to do something to keep the same aesthetic, because we thought with those windows in a brick building like that.
That's
it
what
would-
we don't want.
Yeah, so, okay.
We,
That's helpful.
You know, you
So,
want
yeah.
things to kind of tell their story. This is a new infill building, so to try to match things, it's kind of counterintuitive.
Okay.
In a new development, you would want to match. And then when you're in a historic district, you want the variety.
I love that. Variety. Can I ask one question? Is there a possibility to have less panes in the downstairs windows? There's quite a few that obstruct, just to show an openness of something inside the window. 'Cause it was an office building, or trying to,
Are you
The
making
panes,
it
just
a
so many
retail
panes.
space? Is that what I understand?
yes,
Mhm.
I've had a store for over 25 years.
And you want, yeah.
And it's a beautiful store, but I need a little bit more window to show how I do beautiful windows, to show the gorgeous windows. The product.
Staff?
Your entry will be through that door.
Kelly's,
I can't do that.
let's let Kelly
These
go.
used to be very casual meetings before COVID, excuse me.
They did.
Your entry will be through the staircase door?
Yes, so we would enter, since there's two businesses, one upstairs.
Yeah.
We were thinking of putting just the entryway right to the right. There's a hallway, and we've just put a beautiful French doors going into the store, just leave them open, and still have the exterior door present outside, weather permitting, and just to separate the two businesses. And then we would have just the two windows up front.
Well,
That's-
I would say, and Susan can say, to me, this doesn't bother a thing.
Well, I think and I know Kelly's trying to say something.
Oh,
We need to
say
let her
something,
talk.
Kelly.
Well, this goes back to your question about the grid size, and staff would be supportive of a larger grid size, but keeping in mind the French eclectic architectural style. So their grids are prevalent in that style, but there are a number of different sizes. If you look at some examples, and we can help you with those with some of the books we have.
So if for longevity, I know you mentioned, having the wood, but if they did the windows with the metal finials, but just painted them that cream color, so you really couldn't differentiate to whether or not it was metal or wood, just for longevity's sake, do you think that would be allowed? And then also, I think what Denise would like to do too is put a French door where that entry door is as well, so that everything is more uniform on the building there.
Do you mean replace the white door with the 6-grid window with a door that has much more glazing
Yes.
in it? Okay, yes.
I would not have any problem with that.
Okay.
And I actually think taking that shrubbery out and bringing that on down, to me, is a plus.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So would you have a problem? It wouldn't be a French door, but it would come down almost to the sidewalk there. Put a larger window in there so that it was almost the size of French doors
Yeah.
as well?
In the middle,
Even though we have to cut into some of the brick there at the bottom, you wouldn't have a problem with that?
I wouldn't.
Okay.
But I have a big problem with metal windows in this
Okay.
building. And I would want to see them be wood or wood composite.
Okay.
They won't read the same painted white because the profile is so much thinner and different. So,
Okay, well, maybe we can find something
and
that's a
then
composite
I
that'll last.
think when you show the picture with the large grids on this upstairs balcony, that looks wacky to me. It
I
doesn't
apologize.
look in the context of the building to me.
Absolutely.
But if you're just looking at the bottom, and if that were, more of a French door, if those grids, I think for that style, a little bit different grid system, if you did less panes, I'm trying to, I love looking things up on the internet, but
Oh, yeah.
I won't take that time while I'm trying to be the chair.
Well, we would love your suggestions, and of course, it would all be uniform, the
But
upstairs as well as the
now
down.
that I'm looking at that shrubbery, I'm just like, this just feels like the building got to be a little something to me, as opposed to,
Yeah.
And so that's our idea basically, is to get your recommendations on the grid size and the construction of the windows and what we would be able to do. So
The-
this has been really helpful for us. So, with there not being that as much, what's the word I'm looking for? With the first two folks, there were a lot of things that they needed to move through. Would this be something that we could just make these changes and then bring it back to the staff, or would it have to come back to?
it'll have to come back to the commission.
Okay.
Because this is a pretty big change in our world
Gotcha.
on a building.
Okay.
And even though it's not a historic building, it's getting there, and it absolutely is part of the Main Street story.
Sure.
The gentleman that built these, the Oak and your building, traveled extensively in Europe and was trying, and the Baskin Robbins store, if you'll look there, and was trying so hard to help the revitalization of downtown Franklin, Bill DePriest, and was trying to bring like a European village-type look to downtown, and it's part of our story.
And I would have to say that the grid pattern that is existing, I feel like it needs to stay in that pattern because of the style that it is, and being true to that style and trying to manipulate those. I'm not sure, quite frankly, what you could come up with. Because that's what you would see on that style of house. You would see, like 6/6, or, and possibly the part that I think could be manipulated would be that large window.
That's what I think.
If that were one big plate glass window and everything else were this, the grid system that you already have, that to me honors the building. And I think we are getting close to it being historic.
So
And-
you're okay with it, with that middle window then being a one solid plate glass
Right,
window?
right.
I think it actually, if you look at the shrubbery sitting there, and then you look at what you've given us, the Photoshop, to me, it lets the building just have a little life that it doesn't maybe have right now, because it was built as offices.
Okay, well, then, let me just ask you this, and so what if we just keep the windows the same? Keep the upstairs windows the same, the window on the right the same, put the large plate glass window in the middle on the lower section,
And
and
the
then just put a
door.
French door in that matches the grid system.
I
of those
think you're going to
others.
make everybody
Yeah.
Oh, that would be very simple.
happy, and I think
Okay.
it saves you money.
Yeah, absolutely, okay.
That sounds fabulous.
And I think it would make all the difference.
Okay, all right,
Sounds lovely. Can I ask one more question as well?
yeah.
What about putting a firelight, keeping the existing light that's above the door, the main entrance? I'm not sure if that's even possible, but I do have someone that can come out and making that.
Oh, a gas light?
A gas light, sorry about that, yes.
We'll let Kelly speak to that.
Gas lights predate the construction of this particular building, and so the guidelines would recommend that those types of lights, the gas lights, only are placed on buildings that meet that age requirement, so that it's authentic. Gas
Okay.
lights are beautiful, but not on a building of this age, not typically seen.
Thank
Okay,
you.
all right.
Answers it, perfect, thanks.
You good?
I think we're good.
All
Thank you
right,
so much.
thank you
Thank
all.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank
you.
you.
It's nice to meet
Welcome
you.
to Franklin.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. Appreciate it.
You're, We've got another lady that been a big part of Main Street that moved here from California
Oh, that's
and
wonderful.
became a part of Main Street. I think she's actually leasing out her building now, but, oh, and, well, there's several now that I think about it. But
Oh, wow. Well, I'm honored. It's a dream come true for me, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm happy to be here. Have a great day. Sorry, I'm not used to talking.
is,
Can you tell? It's terrible.
is there anything else that we need to discuss this evening, Kelly? Then
No?
we'll adjourn.
All right,
We're adjourned.
we're adjourned.